For a record 6 years now, Squarespace has been helping me turn my dream into reality, and that's what Squarespace does for millions of other people too. Their industry-leading website creation tools help millions of people start new careers, build new businesses, or just get things done. They're offering a special discount to viewers of this channel, so stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Okay, Diablo 4 Lord of Hatred. Been really excited to talk about this one since there's actually a fair amount to cover. Just to set this up though, you really should know about the review process that applied to all reviewers. This review did not take place on live servers. Instead, Blizzard set us up with test accounts on test realms, and they gave us unrestricted access to the full expansion experience for a full week. Notably, they did not give us access to any of the upcoming seasonal content, which to be honest is kind of a big missed opportunity since seasonal content is nowadays an integral part of the Diablo 4 experience, and I found it's often pretty good, so not being able to comment on it here as part of the review is a disappointment. In terms of what I personally played during the review period, I played a hell of a lot of it, pun intended. I played through the campaign experience with a warlock starting at level 1 and then spent some time at the endgame with that character. After that, I rolled a level 1 paladin and leveled him through the endgame experience only, eventually pushing him up to Torment 7, which is where the gear check stuff really starts to kick in, and it was clear to me that I'd have to really start grinding in order to push him higher. All in, I'm guessing I spent around 30 hours with the expansion over the past week across 2 characters, plenty of time spent at the endgame to really get a sense of how all of that feels, but like I said, sans seasonal content, which is a real bummer because that can often make a huge difference. Before we kick off, I think you should also know about my history with Diablo 4, which is that I've always liked this video game. Even in its launch state, I agreed with all of the issues that people pointed out, but ultimately, I was on board with the tone, the world design, the class fantasies, the storyline. It was by no means perfect, but as I remarked back then, I thought it was a really solid foundation that Blizzard could and would build on, given that Diablo 4 is an evolving live service game, just as Diablo 3 was, it's just that we didn't have the term live service back then. As a result, I've continued to play Diablo 4 after its initial launch. I played a few seasons prior to the arrival of the previous expansion, Vessel of Hatred. I played through that expansion and a little more after that. More recently, I went back to the game with the release of the Paladin class, since you could get early access to it by pre-ordering the Lord of Hatred expansion. I played the shit out of that season, man. I fucking loved it. The Paladin was absurdly broken. It was just a great time. I provide all of this setup because I view these sorts of expansion reviews for live service games in a particular way. Similar to when I'd review a Destiny expansion, the review of the actual expansion content is only one part of the equation because frankly speaking, expansions for live service games are rarely so good that they might move someone to pick up the game for the first time or return to it after they've lost interest. Instead, these expansions are typically major milestones in the live service evolution, and they become useful checkpoints to stand back and take in the entire breadth of offering and ask, okay, how are we doing? How is Diablo 4 in 2026? And is it worth either picking up or stepping back into? Is it worth your time and money? Short answer to that question, I think yes, absolutely. If you are in the market for a casual and accessible ARPG experience that is quite beholden to seasonal content pacing. We'll talk more about this later, but I think the main draw of Diablo 4 in its current form is that rather than feeling self-conscious about how streamlined and accessible it is, or how quick it is to move through its progression and itemization systems, Blizzard have essentially embraced those aspects of the game and built an ARPG where it's incredibly easy to step in, get leveled, get geared, feel powerful, and have fun. It's not overly complex, so you don't have to study spreadsheets in order to understand it, and the time requirements are so low that they will genuinely surprise you. For some, that's going to be the worst imaginable ARPG experience, because they want depth and complexity and grind in a game that will last them for hundreds or thousands of hours, and you know what? Fair enough. But Diablo 4 isn't trying to be that. I think it's a game that is smartly aged with its audience, appealing to ARPG fans who don't have a lot of time to grind and who are looking for a more instantaneous experience. If you are looking for an ARPG experience that pushes back on you, then I think Diablo 4 probably isn't for you. But if you're looking for a game that welcomes you with open arms, inviting you to relax and click buttons and just to have fun, then I think you're going to be very pleasantly surprised by how much Diablo 4 has to offer and how far it's come since its initial launch.
Come to kill remains of me.
You really are what they say.
Or let's talk about the expansion's campaign experience first. Just in case you are wondering, yes, you can skip straight to it if you have already completed the base game campaign and the first expansion. If you haven't played that content, I really recommend doing so before stepping into Lord of Hatred, because the storyline is not only a direct continuation of that saga, but also the conclusion to that saga, and most of the narrative impact of the expansion will be lost on you if you haven't experienced the story leading up to it. In that context, if I'm honest, it's actually really difficult to talk about the expansion storyline without spoiling things, so I'm going to keep things super high level. The previous expansion, Vessel of Hatred, was roundly criticized for its short, uninteresting campaign storyline that felt like it was spinning its wheels in preparation for a climax that never arrived. It was a deeply, deeply disappointing campaign experience, full stop. Contrast between that expansion and this is like, it feels like it was made by two totally different companies. This is a really beefy 10-ish hour campaign that feels extremely dense owing to just how much story content there is and how deliberate all of that story content feels. There is no spinning of the wheels here, no wasted time. It's a really breathless, relentless Act 3 storyline that centers on the most important characters, giving them each plenty of screen time and telling their stories in ways that make the characters feel layered and interesting. This continues to be a story about the battle against Mephisto, the Lord of Hatred, but what I found most compelling about it is that it returns to what made the storyline of the base game so compelling. That Lilith storyline was very centered on the way that demons use humanity as pawns in their internecine conflicts, and the actions of humans are inherently more horrific than the actions of demons because humans are real. When those villagers murder that priest in cold blood in the church with Lilith standing over them, that is far more affecting than if Lilith were to have done the deed herself. The Lord of Hatred storyline employs a similar conceit. Mephisto has possessed the body of Akarat, a famed holy man and prophet of Sanctuary. With this body, Mephisto is able to trick the people of Sanctuary into becoming his acolytes, and in Akarat's name, they commit horrible misdeeds. The idea of a murderous cult of religious zealots fits very neatly in Diablo's universe, but to see Sanctuary's well-meaning innocents tricked into such a cult is a chilling twist. I won't comment on the lore implications of everything that takes place in this expansion because frankly, I'm not well versed in Diablo lore, and ultimately it doesn't really matter that much to me. What matters to me with an expansion like this is this story holding my attention? Is it surprising me? Is it making me reflect on the motivations of his characters? And do I feel as though this story exists as more than just a vessel for gameplay scenarios? The answer to all of those questions is a resounding yes. But separate from all of that, the telling of this story is at times pretty magnificent. Blizzard have put a huge amount of effort into the presentation of this story with arresting visual motifs, elaborate cinematic cutscenes, and some absolutely stunning music. Honestly, the soundtrack in this expansion is like one of its best features for sure. This presentation really elevates this package. It's possible to tell a great video game story using only still images or just straight text, but it's more affecting when we can see it in motion and when the art design of a scene ignites your imagination or when a stirring score builds to a violent crescendo. This is the concluding chapter in Diablo 4's first saga, and Blizzard has spared no expense in making this climax feel truly climactic.
It is in our nature to hate,
Lorath.
and that is why I've brought you here, to change that nature.
As for what you're doing during this campaign, this is where things start to drop off pretty hard, but it'll take some time to explain why, so bear with me. First of all, Lord of Hatred is set on the island of Skobos, which is very similar to the rest of Sanctuary. I'd go as far as to say is the only thing that really sets it apart is its soundtrack, which has a really strong Mediterranean vocalist vibe going the whole way through. The inherent challenge of an ARPG is that it's difficult to be too ambitious with your level design. The forced perspective limits verticality, and the core gameplay loop isn't conducive to layouts that demand much thought or attention. Space in ARPGs is generally speaking just a flat plane on which to house the loot pinatas, and while you can put some playful spins on that from time to time, can't do it too often lest it gets in the way of all the clicking and the looting. Skobos does its best as a destination, but even with its new aesthetics, new enemy types, and wonderful music, it still feels like you've been here before, and precious few of the gameplay scenarios that Blizzard have cooked up make Skobos feel truly unique or memorable. As a result, the campaign is just 10 or so hours of fairly standard Diablo 4 gameplay. You know, clicking on demons, collecting loot upgrades, leveling a character up, unlocking new abilities, that's it. And honestly, that would be totally fine if you were able to tap into at least some of the things that make Diablo 4 an interesting video game, namely its buildcraft that allows you to not only make fun choices about how to build and play your character, but also brings with it a feeling of power progression that is sorely lacking during the campaign leveling experience. Like I said though, it'll take a bit of time to explain, so bear with me. Here we go. The biggest complaint leveled at Diablo 4 at launch was its scaling world that leveled with you during the campaign. This meant that you never actually felt like you were getting more powerful as you were playing. You were just picking up items that would keep you at the same net zero power level, and the next time you gained a level, the world would level up with you, and you'd instantly start feeling weaker again. A big problem in a genre where feeling powerful is kind of the whole point. Lord of Hatred is built on the same foundations in that the campaign experience levels with you So at no point do you ever pick up an item and go, fuck yeah, man, I feel so much stronger now. The feedback loop that comes from item progression just isn't there during the leveling experience, and that can make leveling feel pretty boring. The skill tree is the main way that you start to feel more powerful as you play while leveling, and the overhaul to the skill tree is a net positive for the game. Without going into too much detail, all of the old passive stat notes have been removed, and the entire skill tree is now focused on abilities and passives attached to those abilities. So instead of having a node that just says, get 5% more crit, there'll be a node that branches off one of your skills that says, get 5% more crit when you use this skill. The thing is, you've selected all of your ability choices and most of your passive choices by like level 30-ish when you're leveling, and after that, the main thing you're doing each level is putting additional points into each of the ability nodes you've already selected. You used to be able to put 5 ranks into each ability, now you put a total of 15 ranks, and you'll do this for at least 4 of your core abilities. So that's literally like at least 60 levels where all you're doing is just dumping skill points into nodes you've already selected. Because don't forget, you also get additional skill points from world exploration. Overall, this just doesn't feel good. It feels like an unresolved design challenge that Blizzard couldn't solve before shipping the expansion, because putting so many points into single nodes and getting such incremental benefit for doing so is just really boring, and it takes some of the wind out of the sails of this skill tree redesign, since the goal of it was surely to make node choices feel much more meaningful, and they do when you're actually making choices. But the whole put 15 ranks into each skill thing really sucks, and I'd be really surprised if this isn't overhauled in a future update. And this wouldn't be such a problem if the gear game was beginning to kick in earlier, but it's not. During my campaign leveling experience, I got precious few legendaries and 0 unique items, and these are the items that make Diablo fun. Back in the day when the world didn't scale with us, it used to be fun when we'd go from a blue mace to a yellow mace because we could feel that power differential. We can't feel it anymore. Now the power differential that we feel comes from gear with legendary affixes, but in particular, unique affixes, which are so potent that they can encourage you to try new skills that you wouldn't otherwise be using. And I'll tell you this right now, Diablo 4 is stuffed full of really fun, legendary, and unique affixes because it's been building a library of them since launch. There's so much here, so what's the harm of letting players get a taste of that while leveling? People who play Diablo 4 regularly are probably saying to themselves right now, dude, leveling is super fast, and the focus of this game is the endgame. In the time that you spent complaining about this, you could have leveled a character to level 70. And look, that's partly true, but that's the perspective of people who already know and like and understand this game. Think about it from an onboarding perspective. Most of the people who pick up Diablo 4 for the first time, or who return to it after a long spell, are in for a fairly boring leveling experience, one where they don't ever feel like they're getting more powerful, one where they're just mindlessly dumping 14 extra points into a skill node they've already selected without feeling any of the benefits, and one where buildcraft isn't an option because legendaries and uniques are not dropping. I don't know the exact answer to this, but it's got to be something along the lines of giving people access to the Paragon board sooner, because some of those nodes can be real game changers, and absolutely overhaul the drop rates of legendary and unique items while leveling so that people can start tapping into that goodness sooner. As compelling as the Lord of Hatred storyline and presentation is, and as good as the music on Scovos is, it doesn't ever feel like anything more than a slow jog towards the true starting line of the Diablo 4 experience. And with Diablo 4 now having so much to offer in terms of buildcraft, I don't think that Blizzard needs to hold quite so much in reserve. So that's the campaign. Do I recommend picking up Lord of Hatred just to experience this campaign? Honestly, no, but that's not because the campaign itself is bad, just because outside of the story, it's a poor showcase of what makes Diablo 4 a good game in its present form. Because I really do believe that this game is a lot stronger than what this campaign showcases, and I think the broader package is why you might want to pick up Lord of Hatred. But also, it doesn't hurt that the expansion comes with a bunch of other stuff that makes the game better, like, for example, 2 new classes. Lord of Hatred's hallmark feature is the introduction of 2 new classes, the Warlock and the Paladin. The Warlock is a funny one actually, and I don't know how many people know this, but some months back, Blizzard added the Warlock to Diablo 2 Resurrected. Yes, you heard that right, they really did add a new class to a game that is effectively 26 years old now. It's actually kind of cool, to be honest. I did play through the Lord of Hatred campaign with the Warlock, and I also spent some time at the endgame. I have to admit my own personal biases here. I've just never been a fan of the whole caster archetype in ARPGs. Never enjoyed Sorcerer or Witch Doctor or Wizard. I've always been drawn to the physical damage classes. Having said that, I've always had a soft spot for the Necromancer because I love having a little army of skeletons following me around. On that basis, I was hopeful I would click with the Warlock, but unfortunately it just didn't really work for me. That's not a criticism of the class, by the way. I'm just saying that I personally didn't gel with its playstyle or playstyles, because that's an important thing to note about all classes in Diablo 4. They all have multiple flavors informed by your skill choices and your class variant, since each class has its own unique system allowing you to specialize in a particular style of play. The Warlock, for example, has soul shard options, one of which is focused on summoning lots of demons, another one on becoming a demon, another involving shadow form and hexes to debuff targets, and another that's sort of a hybrid of everything. I spent the most time with two of these playstyles, the one where I summon a lot of demons and another one where I regularly transform into a demon so I can cast Hellfire spells. The demon summoning stuff is interesting because I was thinking to myself, okay, how do you make a minion class that doesn't feel like Necromancer again? And Blizzard have definitely figured it out, since Warlock plays absolutely nothing like a Necro. Rather than an army of persistent minions that follow you around, demons are more like projectiles you toss or artillery you place. The basic skill Command Fallen just summons a little demon and sends it charging into your foes so they explode and deal damage. The main core skill called Bombardment involves summoning demons from up above and then smashing them down at range. One of the defensive skills involves summoning a demonic aggro totem who taunts enemies while damaging and debuffing them. Your big damage dealing ability is called Rampage, and that just places an immovable demon somewhere and he just starts smashing the ground all around him. And the ultimate ability summons a massive fiend whose cleave is so wide that it covers most of the battlefield. It's all very cool, very pink, but I found it a little too passive, sort of like I was just setting up these meat grinder traps and then just standing back while my buddies did all the work for me. That led me to switch to the demon form Hellfire style, which I honestly enjoyed a lot more. It was a more traditional caster model where I was flinging out these target-seeking flame demons while also leaving brimstone on the ground, which would detonate under certain conditions. But I also had this Tyrant's Grasp ability that would pull enemies and brimstone towards me so they'd all get blown up faster. And the ultimate is this sick-looking AoE apocalypse thing that I could channel for 6.66 seconds for maximum damage. A very nice touch. So look, I'm not here to criticize the class design because different class fantasies appeal to different people. I'm just saying this one didn't work for me. But oh my god, the Paladin. Now, again, I have to admit my bias here. Paladin is my boy, and he always has been since back in the day. Not just in Diablo, mind you, but in basically every video game I've played as far back as like Baldur's Gate 1, I think. I don't know. Point is, I love me a good Paladin, and Diablo 4's Paladin is a fucking good Paladin, man. Admittedly, a lot of my thoughts from this come from having leveled a Paladin a few months ago when the Paladin was first released as a pre-order bonus. Played so much of that season, and by the end of it, my Paladin was pretty decked out owing to how utterly broken that class was. Rest in peace, Castle Node. I won't forget you, buddy. Regardless of how broken he was, the Paladin was just tremendous fun to play because Blizzard nailed the class fantasy so perfectly. The armor all looks incredible, the playstyles are so much fun, and so in keeping with the established lore of the class. You can build him as a tank, an agile holy warrior, a Hammerden, a Captain America-style shield bro, or an embodiment of the light who can transform into an angelic arbiter. If the Paladin fantasy in video games at all appeals to you, then Lord of Hatred will give you one of the best Paladin experiences you can have in video games, if not the best. It's incredible. It's so good that when Lord of Hatred launches, I will be leveling another Paladin just because I'm nowhere close to tired of him and I'm really keen to experience some of those lesser played playstyles. So those are the two classes that Lord of Hatred serves up, and while I didn't click with the Warlock, I definitely appreciate its unique spin on minion-focused gameplay, and as I've already made abundantly clear, Paladin is absolutely S tier. Now let's round out the expansion discussion by taking a look at some of the other systems-based stuff that Lord of Hatred serves up, stuff like war plans, the Haradrim Cube, talismans, and fishing? The most impactful endgame system introduced with Lord of Hatred are what's called war plans, and they're pretty great actually. Diablo 4's endgame used to be about running nightmare dungeons over and over, and then it was about running the pit over and over, but since the game's launch, Blizzard has added a number of worthwhile endgame activities, each with their own unique flavor, each with their own set of rewards that make them all worthwhile on some level. Things like Hell Tides, endgame bosses, the Undercity, Tree of Whispers quests, that sort of thing. War plans are essentially playlists that you can queue up that let you run these different activities one after the other, and when you've completed the whole playlist, you get some very generous rewards. I don't know how worthwhile those reward packages will be in the the much higher torment tiers, but I was pushing through torments 5, 6, and 7 and found they were definitely worth my time, no question. War plans are really nice because they naturally encourage you to jump around and experience different types of endgame content. It's like putting a Spotify playlist on shuffle and letting it do the thinking for you. You can of course still do those endgame activities without having a war plan active, so if you want to farm pit runs, then there's nothing to stop you doing that. But if you want to let the war plan take the wheel, then you can just click some nodes, open your map to teleport you to the relevant destination, and away you go. The real benefit of running war plans though is the skill tree attached to each of these endgame activities. This is actually pretty awesome. The way this works is that as you complete activities in war plans, you'll earn experience for those activities. So every time I turn in a completed Tree of Whispers during a war plan run, I get experience. That experience eventually gets converted to upgrade points in this here skill tree, allowing me to unlock nodes that will augment the Tree of Whispers activity. The first node, for example, gives me an extra Whisper cache choice whenever I hand in, which is really nice. The next node though is really interesting. Now all caches are either going to be greater quality or junk. This is one of the notable things about these skill trees. They aren't all just bonuses. They're very often risk-reward trade-offs. For example, many of them will allow for extra mobs or even bosses to spawn while you're doing activities, which is good in the sense that you can kill them and get rewarded. They can also kill you. Bottom line though, these skill nodes are ultimately extremely rewarding if you can manage the trade-offs, and I think war plans are a fantastic complement to the seasonal model, since they add both variation and reward to the activities you'd be doing throughout a season. Of course, if you're playing an Eternal character, you get to keep the war plan's progress permanently, so that's nice too. Next up, the Highguard Cube. Never mind, I'm not going to do my Kane impersonation, let's just move on. The Highguard Cube is a returning endgame system that allows you to remix your items or recycle them or finalize them in a way, but we'll get to that. It's similar to previous incarnations in that it's a box that you put stuff into, and depending on what you put in, different stuff comes out. There are a number of new currency items that will drop in Lord of Hatred, with the more sought after ones dropping more frequently in higher torment tiers. The cube lets you change affix categories on your gear, meaning you can really remix the composition of your items. You can do that in a random way, or you can target specific categories by adding additional currencies called tuning prisms. You can re-roll unique powers. So if you have an item with god tier stats, but it has a unique power that doesn't fit your build, then there's a chance that you can make it work. There's also the option to upgrade your items to legendary or even unique, and the recycle unique option is going to be particularly attractive to anyone who gets deep into the endgame, since you always end up with way too many of the same unique that have dropped from boss farm runs. Before, those items were just blacksmith fodder. Now 3 of them will give you another shot at a god roll. But the thing I enjoyed most about the cube was the transfigure item option. This is going to be very familiar to anyone who played the Paladin season a little while ago. The main seasonal mechanic back then was something called sanctification, where you earned a currency that let you sanctify an item. This would give that item an all new affix, sometimes an extremely powerful affix, like adding an entirely new mythic affix to your item. But when you sanctified that item, it could no longer be altered at all. No additional gem slots, no tempering, no enchanting, no masterworking, no nothing. So what this meant is that you would get your item as good as you could possibly get it, and when there was nothing else you could do with it, you then took it to be sanctified. It was kind of like putting a little bow on it, and was a great system that not only felt very satisfying, but would also deliver some truly absurd stat upgrades. Well, transfiguration is essentially sanctification, in that it adds a random stat or affix to your item, but there's a very high chance that the item is no longer modifiable after that. So again, you want to get the item as perfect as you can before you transfigure it. I love this, to be honest. I got some great stat upgrades out of this. Nothing as strong as those mythic affixes from the sanctification process, but maybe I just didn't get lucky enough. Either way, it's nice to see sanctification carried over into the core game. And overall, the Highguard Cube is a nice addition that will deepen buildcraft options while also giving you more things to do with gear that you don't want to equip, rather than just breaking it all down at the blacksmith. What else we got? Oh yeah, talismans and charms. Okay, so these are actually quite a big deal, though it doesn't seem that way at first. When you first unlock this feature, each charm just feels like a random stat stick, and it is. Later on though, you'll start unlocking some of the set charms with 2 or 3 piece bonuses, and you're like, huh, okay. Interesting. Then you start to unlock the set items for your class, and you're like, okay, yeah, now I get it. For a long time now, people have been asking for set items to be added to Diablo 4 because sets are cool, and it's fun to chase a set of gear with the right set bonuses and the perfect stats. Thing is though, implementing set items would clash with all of the work that Blizzard have put into designing legendary, unique, and mythic affixes, since set items take up so many slots on a character sheet. So their solution was to essentially create a whole new character sheet, one that lets you equip a talisman with its own stats and bonuses, as well as up to 6 charms, each with their own stats and bonuses, And this is where Blizzard can deliver set bonuses. In this way, it's purely additive to the existing gear game rather than at odds with it. Obviously, didn't get too many of these set charms during my playthroughs since they drop more at higher torment tiers, but I did get one that very much piqued my curiosity, a paladin set that spreads judgment more quickly and gives me a buff called Judgment Day. That's a buff that reduces my damage taken by 25% and heals me for 3% of my max life every second that it's active. That is a super beefy set bonus, and I will absolutely be chasing that as soon as I get back into the live game. There's also the promise of unique talismans, though I never found any of those while playing. So overall, it's a very broad, very promising system that delivers a much requested feature, set items, and it does so in a way that broadens buildcraft rather than asking you to sacrifice existing gear affixes. Again, another win from Blizzard here. Finally, fishing. Now, I don't know why Blizzard added this to the game. I'm not hating on Diablo 4's fishing specifically. The truth is, I just hate fishing in all video games, so I am the wrong person to ask. Still, I know some people love fishing in video games, and maybe these people will enjoy taking a break from all of the fast-paced, frantic, 1,000 clicks a minute demon slaying so they can stand quietly by the water's edge just clicking once every 5 to 10 seconds instead. Honestly, didn't do too much of this because I just found it kind of boring, but from what I can tell, fishing is mainly a sort of completionist activity. The way it works is that as you fish, you will catch actual fish, but also some items get pulled out of the water. Sometimes actual enemies will jump out as well, but the fish themselves are something you can consume by clicking on them in your inventory, and doing so adds a record of that fish to your fishing log, and different fish appear in different regions, and I guess the goal is to catch them all. I'm sure there are probably some nice surprises hidden within this feature, secret items, secret levels, secret recipes, uniques, whatever. Honestly don't know. All I can say is that it's a little feature that's been added to the game, and it's very optional. It's not like there's a fishing war plan or whatever. And for those of you who enjoy the simple pleasure of clicking on a little bobbing thing when it moves, Blizzard made this just for you. Enjoy. And that really is about it in terms of expansion content. It's a 10-hour-ish campaign, a new location to explore, 2 new classes, war plans, the Horadric Cube, talismans and charms, and fishing. It's certainly not the beefiest expansion content I've ever played in a video game, but it's by no means light on content, and I don't think people are going to feel at all shortchanged by this expansion. On the contrary, I think the climactic storytelling, top-notch presentation, new classes, and meaningful new system additions all feel like Blizzard took to heart the criticisms of the previous expansion and were keen to not repeat those mistakes here. Lord of Hatred is, I think, a good expansion, one that will satisfy existing fans of Diablo 4, giving them plenty of reasons to keep logging in. The more interesting question is this expansion so good that it might prompt you to pick up Diablo 4 for the first time, or return to it after having put it down a little while ago? I don't think that it is, in the sense that the expansion content alone is not reason enough to invest time or money in Diablo 4, but as I mentioned in the intro, I think the overall package of Diablo 4, of which Lord of Hatred is now a part, is definitely worth checking out, so long as you go in with the right expectations. So let's finish the review by talking about that stuff. So this is just my take, but I do think that at its launch, Diablo 4 had its problems, many of them in fact, and those problems seemed more egregious than they otherwise might have given the success of Path of Exile over the preceding decade. Where Blizzard had led the ARPG since its inception, it was pretty clear that grinding gear games had seized the initiative and were delivering an ARPG experience that felt like it was pushing the genre forward. One of the reasons that so many people were so disappointed with the launch state of Diablo 4 was that none of it really felt like it was advancing the ARPG formula. It just felt like a more streamlined version of previous Diablo games, only now with a big open world. And so people could point to Path of Exile and be like, Blizzard, the successful template is right over there. Why are you giving us this casual, streamlined experience when you should be delivering the deepest, most advanced, and most demanding ARPG experience imaginable? Why aren't you beating grinding gear games at their own game when ultimately this has always been your game? And I'm not saying that was the only discourse around Diablo 4 back then, by the way, but I am saying it was a part of it, and it was fair commentary for those who wanted incredibly deep, sophisticated, and demanding ARPG experiences. Diablo 4 launched in June of 2023, and Path of Exile 2 launched 18 months later at the end of 2024. And I think that was a bit of a wake-up call for a lot of people who liked the idea of how demanding PoE is, but then when the reality slaps them in the face and they're not making any progress and the game is overwhelming them with complexity, they just sort of nope out. That's not a criticism of the game, by the way, since a lot of people love that stuff. It's just that many others don't. And quite frankly, that was my journey with PoE 2 when I played it at launch. I loved so many aspects of it, but after a while, I just hit what felt like a brick wall, and I didn't have the time or energy to really break through it. So I haven't gone back to the game since. I want to, and I will one day, but only when I feel in the mood for that sort of thing. So what I ended up doing was going back to Diablo 4 from time to time, and over 12 seasons of content, the game has evolved a lot, and I think the central through line is that Diablo 4 is intended to be the sort of ARPG experience that you can step into and enjoy without having to think about it too deeply or without having to put too many hours into it. I think most people who haven't played the game recently would be stunned by how quickly you can level up and start tackling in-game activities. I think most people would be surprised by how easy it is to gear up and start taking big bites out of the seasonal content checklist. And that isn't by using cheesy min-maxing speedrun strategies, by the way. Just by playing the game, you can feel that Blizzard wants you to level and gear quickly. When you do reach that endgame, there's quite a bit to do now. There's all the endgame activities I spoke about when I talked about war plans, but there's also the seasonal content, which I actually quite enjoy. Imagine a big set of goals for your characters broken up into manageable milestones, and completing them awards you with gear and experience and gold and seasonal currency, which is used to power whatever seasonal gimmick is active. Sanctification was a good example, but every season has its own version of this. And on top of that, there's always unique seasonal gameplay activities too, and Blizzard used that seasonal content as a means of prototyping ideas, with the good ones often making their way into the core game when the season is over, e.g. Transfiguration. I look at what I accomplished during just this 1 week test window. I leveled 2 characters to 70, I hit Paragon level 80, I got to Torment 7 of 12, and I didn't start putting gems into my gear until like Torment 5. 7 is where it starts to feel like the game is beginning to ask a little more of me, so I stopped playing there to save myself for the live game. I got my Paladin some basic but functional gear, I had a nice build going that was fun to play, I was having a great time, and that was without any of the seasonal content enabled. My progress would have been much faster had that been live, and had I been able to play alongside other people, because I never encountered anyone else while playing on my test server. When Lord of Hatred drops, there will be 8 playable characters in Diablo 4, each with a number of different playstyles, but all those playstyles are easy to achieve, both in terms of understanding them and the gear required to make them work. There are also so many quality of life systems in place to make it easier to level multiple characters in a given season. There's hardcore mode if that interests you, and there's also the Eternal Realms if you have no interest in seasonal content whatsoever and just want to play one character forever and ever. That's still 100% doable. When Diablo 4 first launched, I don't think Blizzard knew exactly where they wanted to take this game long term, but after 12 seasons of content and 2 expansions, I think it's very clear that Blizzard are intending for Diablo 4 to be a fairly casual, friendly, accessible ARPG that is meant to empower you and flood you with rewards, and only start pushing back when you get to those really high torment tiers. For that, it's pretty chill, and it's a very common story at this point to hear from Diablo 4 players who log in at the start of each season, smash out a max Paragon character and clear all of the seasonal content in like 2 weeks, and then log off happy, ready and willing to do it again when the next season drops. I do vividly recall the advice that Blizzard gave to Bungie all of those years ago. People are going to leave your game whether you like it or not, so when they do, make sure they leave happy so that they might want to come back again in the future. For many, myself included, that's what Diablo 4 is now. Some people can make it their forever game, but those people are probably going to be better served by different games. I don't think Blizzard are at all interested in delivering a slow release style ARPG experience that asks a lot of you. I think they're more interested in Diablo 4 being a sort of fire hose of fun that quickly drenches you with loot and then turns off, allowing you to dry yourself off and get ready to do it all again next season. Enjoyed this way, I think Diablo 4 is great, and it's only gotten better thanks to everything that's been added to Lord of Hatred, an expansion that's added content, refined some systems, broadened some others, but ultimately reinforced the game's identity as one that's looking to meet you on your terms rather than the other way around. That's not going to appeal to everyone, absolutely, but it certainly appeals to a lot of people, myself included, and for that reason, I recommend it to you. Do you run your own business, or do you want to? If so, a website is really helpful, and there's no better or easier way to build a website than Squarespace. Let's say, for example, you have a store that sells stuff, I don't know, clothes, shoes, furniture, cell phones, whatever. That store exists in just one spot, and you're probably only able to service your local area, but what if you could tap into a much bigger market? What if you had a website that lets customers find you no matter where they are? What if they could see your inventory online and make purchases? And what if you had a website that could facilitate all of that seamlessly? Well, that's exactly what Squarespace does. Squarespace lets you build professional-looking websites in minutes. You just select from their extensive list of pre-built templates, customize those templates to your heart's desire, and boom, an incredible-looking website that looks like it costs thousands of dollars to build, when in reality, you did it all yourself. That's just the front end, whereas business owners are going to be equally interested in the back end. Squarespace provides intuitive tools for inventory management, customized shipping options and label printing, simple payment solutions through platforms like PayPal and Stripe, and detailed analytics so you can track how well business is going. There's even award-winning customer support on hand to assist you should you ever get stuck or just need some advice. It's an easy-to-use end-to-end solution that could change your life, to be honest. A website is one of the best ways to get yourself or your business out there, so if you're thinking about kicking off something new, either personally or professionally, a website is certainly going to be a great step in that process. If you want to get started, then visit squarespace.com to start building your website through their free trial, and if you want to get serious, then use offer code SKILLUP at checkout for a 10% discount off your purchase of a website or a domain name. Thanks very much to Squarespace for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.